Just all right. This is August 26, 2024 at Delray Beach Nooners Treasure in the Traditions Workshop, Tradition 3, with Miss Francine W. Miss Francine?
Thank you, Carol. Good evening. My name is Francine. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, guys. My sobriety date is July 26, 1979. I have not had a drink, nor have I gotten high in 45 years. And I got to tell you, that blows me away. Blows me away. I feel quite privileged to be here. And I want to thank Carol. You know, when Carol first came up with the idea, she called me. And honestly, I was quite honored that she even called to ask me, you know, about putting together a workshop like this, because I've done a lot of them. I've put some together. I've been a party to some. And so, you know, whenever I'm asked to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, if there is any way whatsoever for me to say yes, I say yes. So thank you, Carol, for first asking for my input and then asking me to participate. So thank you. All right, so we are timing. So welcome if you are new to this program. If you're new and you're sitting in a traditions workshop, oh my God, God bless you. Because when I was new and when I was in a meeting and they were reading the traditions, I got up and walked out, of course, until my sponsor caught me doing it one day, and I can assure you I never did it again. But if you are new and you're listening to the traditions, fabulous. So grateful you're here. And you know what? Today might be one that really is important. So, Tradition 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. So I want to first say that I was taught very, very early on that every one of the traditions and every one of the steps asks me to sacrifice something. And overall, they're asking me to sacrifice the little me for the greater good of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in this tradition, it's asking me to set aside my fear of what would happen if Alcoholics Anonymous allowed all kinds of people to come into the program. You know, all kinds of people. And thank God for this tradition, because I don't know about you guys, but I am definitely someone who is extremely grateful that Tradition 3 is one of our traditions. So I like to read and talk, because I find that Bill W., he was such an amazing writer, you know, and the things that he says, to me, they are so appropriate for anything, whether we're dealing with a tradition or a concept. So I'm going to start with the 12 and 12, and I'll let you know what page I'm reading from, because I always appreciate that when a speaker is talking and reading. I want to know what they're reading from. So I'm first starting here on page 139 in the 12 and 12. And the very first sentence, it says, "This tradition is packed with meaning, for AA is really saying to every serious drinker, you are an AA member if you say so." If you say so. It doesn't matter what I may think, but if you say you're an AA member, then you have a place in our program. And it doesn't matter whether you've been here over and over and over again. It doesn't even matter if you're still drinking. If you say you're an alcoholic and you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, then we are obliged to agree with you. So then it says, I go to the next page, 140, because this is one of the most important sections in the entire tradition, because this is what makes me know that I can be here. It says, "We were resolved to admit nobody to AA but that hypothetical class of people we termed pure alcoholics, except for their guzzling and the unfortunate results thereof. They could have no other complications. So beggars, tramps, asylum inmates, prisoners, queers, playing crackpots, and fallen women were definitely out. Yes, sir, we cater only to pure and respectable alcoholics. Any others would surely destroy us." Well, I must tell you, Had this not been here, they would not have allowed me in because I fit into at least two of them. You see, I'm a drug addicted, alcoholic prostitute off the streets of New York. By the way, fallen woman is a nice word for saying prostitute. I was homeless at 18 years old. They would not have allowed me here. They definitely would not have allowed me here because of my past. But because of this tradition, women like me get to take a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and not one person can tell me I can't be here. So I'm going to go to page 37 in Language of the Heart. And it says, which I like, it says 2 or 3 years ago, the central office asked the groups to list their membership rules and send them in. After they arrived, we set them all down. They took a great many sheets of paper. So funny. A little reflection upon these many rules brought us to an astonishing conclusion. If all of these edicts had been enforced everywhere at once, it would have been practically impossible for any alcoholic to ever have joined Alcoholics Anonymous. About 9/10 of our oldsters and best members could never have gotten in. I wonder how many of you would not be allowed in Alcoholics Anonymous but for this tradition. Again, I know I would not have been allowed, not at all. Then I want to go down, I'm going between the two books, back to page 140 in the 12 and 12. It talks about what the reason is for a lot of us feeling that way. So it talks about fear. How could we then guess that all these fears were to prove groundless? All the fears that we had about people coming in who we thought were different. Maybe they were a different skin color. Maybe they had a different life history. Maybe there was a single parent. Maybe they were gay. Maybe they were drug addicts. Maybe they didn't believe in God. All the reasons that we had for these membership rules initially, whereby we kept you guys out and some guys in. And like it said in the reading, most of us wouldn't even be here if those rules were still in place. How could we then guess that all those fears were to prove groundless? How could we know that thousands of these sometimes frightening people were to make astonishing recoveries and become our greatest workers and intimate friends? See, I happen to believe that today. You know, I have become a tireless worker in Alcoholics Anonymous. And perhaps had you kept me out because of my history, I don't think you would have the benefit of whatever it is I get to bring to the table. And I believe today, because you've allowed me in, and because I had such strong sponsorship in my early years, I get to be someone who is so dedicated to Alcoholics Anonymous, so dedicated to giving back, so amazingly in love with you that I want to keep saying yes, yes, and yes some more. But I wonder how many of Alcoholics Anonymous's dedicated members, longtime dedicated members, like my current sponsor. My current sponsor got sober at 13 years old. She had a pretty low bottom story as well. And yet today, with 52 years of sobriety, she's a really good member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. She wouldn't have been allowed in here either. So again, because some of us have been allowed to stay here, we become willing to turn back and reach our hands out and be there for another person. And then I like, oh, there's so much in here I love. Then I like here, we're going to go to page 142 in the 12 and 12. Actually, it'll be the last paragraph on 141, going to the top of 142. A newcomer appeared at one of these groups. So this is talking about one of the types of people who Alcoholics Anonymous, the original members, didn't want to come in. A newcomer appeared at one of these groups, knocked on the door and asked to be let in. He talked frankly frankly with the group's oldest member. He soon proved that he was a desperate case and that above all, he wanted to get well. But he asked, will you let me join your group since I am the victim of another addiction, even worse stigmatized than alcoholism? You may not want me among you, or will you? I fell into that category. I was a drug addict. Now, alcohol is my primary condition, but I had a double problem when I had many problems when I got here. But like this person, I had that, I was afflicted with a double addiction. You might not have let me in here, but for the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous has no membership rules. And then here's another. There was the dilemma. What should the group do? And this even happens today when you think about it. Very often we want to say, no, that person doesn't belong here, or this one can come in. And even if you're not someone that says that, often alcoholics think it. I'll give you an example. I remember pre-pandemic, my home group was a group here in Palm Desert called Fellowship Hall. And we would meet there. That wasn't the group, but we would hold our meetings at Fellowship Hall. And this was my home group. This particular group was a step meeting that we used to have there. And there was a woman one day who had come in, and she had tattoos all over her body, like they had never seen somebody with tattoos, but she had tattoos all over her body, and she was dressed in a way that some of these highbrow women in my meeting were not dressed. And I would hear the little chirpings around. This is before the meeting started. I walked over to her and I said hello, because that's who I am. I mean, I'm a low bottom. So I'm not looking I'm not looking down on anyone, at least not those days. And I remember going over to her, introducing myself. I discovered that she had 20 plus years of sobriety, but nobody else knew it. All the women are kind of chirping around. And then, because this was a birthday meeting, she got up and announced that she had 20 years sobriety. She had more sobriety than several of the women who were taking her inventory. But the reality was they were judging her, and she had been sober a long time. They judged her because she had tattoos. They judged her because she was dressed a little differently. I'd like to tell you, by that stage of my recovery, I wasn't judging like that, but I have been the victim. And I have also been the one who sat back and took someone else's inventory as if I were better than them. Fortunately for me today, because of the work that I get to do, there's no sitting back looking at you thinking I'm better than you, because I am one drink away from a drunk, just like everyone else in this meeting. But how easy it is for us to sometimes lose sight that because someone looks different, because they are different, because they don't speak the same as we do, that they don't belong in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is as far from the truth as anything I can imagine. And then here, oh, there's so much I love in here. In Language of the Heart, on page 38, at the very bottom, every older AA shudders when he remembers the names of persons he once condemned. People he confidently predicted would never sober up. Persons he was sure ought to be thrown out of AA for the good of the movement. Now that some of these very persons have been sober for years and may be numbered among his best friends, the old-timer thinks to himself, what if everybody had judged these people as I once did? What if AA had slammed its door in their faces? Where would they be now? And again, I keep coming back to, we have no membership rules. Who are we to say that A, B, or C does not belong here? Who are we to say? Because for many of the people that we think initially should not be in this program for whatever the reason, again, what if everybody had judged these people as I once did? What if AA had slammed its door in their faces? I look around this room and I don't know most of you, but I wonder if you would have been allowed in Alcoholics Anonymous had there been membership rules. Maybe because you're a woman, maybe because you're gay, maybe because you're young. I was relatively young when I got here. They could have easily said, you're too young. You need to go and drink a little bit more. They didn't say that to me when they heard my story, but I remember having many young people tell me how, old timers would say, I spilled more than you drank. Well, that's a horrible thing to say to someone. It's a horrible thing. And thank God today, most of us don't say that. Maybe some individuals still do, but most of us don't. And thank God, because there's so many young people today that get sober and stay sober and become some of Alcoholics Anonymous's most wonderful members. And then I'd like to read another section here. This is also in Language of the Heart on page 39. And this talks about the exception, the sometimes exception when we can perhaps have a rule that says certain people can't come in for today. So here's what Bill had to say, and he ties it to tradition 1. Of course, this is not the universal state of affairs throughout AA. Membership rules still exist. If a member persists in coming to meetings drunk, he may be led outside. We may ask someone to take him away, but in most groups, he can come back the next day. If sober, though he may be thrown out of a club, nobody thinks of throwing him out of AA. He is a member as long as he says he is. So tying that to tradition number 1, I remember the first time I had actually experienced tradition 1 coming up. I was at a meeting. I was living in New York at the time, and I remember the place where I used to go to meetings was called the 71st Street. Well, at the time it was the 79th Street Workshop. And there was a guy who used to come in every day, and he was so disruptive. And they would always ask him, please sit down. We're having a meeting. They would ask him nicely. Every day he'd come in, he'd walk up and down the aisle. And so one day, the secretary and a few of the men escorted him out of the room. I have to tell you, I was appalled. I thought, oh my God, they put this guy out of AA. They can't do that. And I remember talking to my sponsor saying, how could they put him out of AA? And I remember her telling me that the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important thing. Yes, the individual is important, but we have to protect the rooms so that there's a place for us to come. If anybody can do anything they want and disrupt the meeting, then it makes it difficult for the rest of us. She also said to me, they can't ban him from AA. They can just say, when you are ready to come back and not be disrupted, you are absolutely welcome. That is the tie-in here. Bill says, yes, membership rules still exist. But again, we can't throw him out of AA. We can just say, come back when you are ready and able to be less disruptive. So I love this tradition. Honestly, the more I think about it every day, the more grateful I am for not only this, but all of the traditions, but in particular this one, because of tradition 3, someone like me with the kind of history that I had, the kind of life that I have led, the kind of things that I have done, because of this tradition, no one can ever say to me, Francine, you do not belong here. Francine, we are banning you from Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, if I become disruptive, if I become someone who is inappropriate or goes against the particular rules that a group has, and each group is autonomous. Each group can set its own guidelines. If I become someone that goes against the guidelines of a particular group, They can ask me to leave. They can even boot me out of the meeting temporarily, but they cannot ban me from Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that is where I am going to end for the moment. And I think I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions, comments. And I see I have about 10 minutes left, but I'm going to leave it and I may come back. I may circle back, Carol. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Francine.